A very warm welcome, dear listeners. You're listening to the DigiCompetence podcast with Anne Cork and Philip Ramin.
Yes, and today we're speaking to Sunita Parasuraman. Sunita originates from India, but has been in the US for many years. She has a unique mixture of engineering and finance skills. Sunita holds a bachelor in metallurgical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, a master of science in materials science and engineering from the University of Pennsylvania, an NACD certificate in Cyber-Risk Oversight from the Carnegie Mellon University, and a Master of Business Administration and Finance from the University of California in Berkeley. Currently, Sunita holds a number of board positions, for example, at Iris Energy, where she's chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, and at the Baldwin Group, where she's currently a member of the Audit Committee and Technology and Cyber Risk Committee. Sunita is also a seasoned finance and venture capital leader who spent 12 years at Meta in the US, and until 2023 was the head of investments for new product experimentation at Meta, where she led early stage corporate venture capital initiatives from 2020 to 2023. She also played a key role in the development of Meta's blockchain strategy and building Meta's treasury team from the ground up. She was responsible for capital markets, treasury operations, and insurance, managing teams across Menlo Park, Dublin, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. Sunita's career before Meta included significant leadership positions at other major companies, for example, as senior treasury manager at VMware, and before that in a similar role at Genentech, focusing on foreign exchange hedging, share repurchase, and investment portfolio management. And before that, she was also treasury manager at Apple in the US. Sunita is also an author. Her first book, written in 1997, Going to America, An Applicant's Guide to Higher Studies in the US, was written before the information was available on the internet, sharing her own knowledge, and became a bestseller. Her second book is also a bestseller. Fun fact about Sunita, she truly enjoys traveling alone, and as a middle child of 3 children, she ended up traveling by herself to see the doctor, to visit her grandparents by train in another town, and so on, because her parents were busy. And as a child, one of her hobbies was writing to the editor of the local newspaper. Welcome to our podcast, Sunita.
Thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
Sunita, you were the only girl in your class at the Indian Institute of Technology studying engineering. Just how difficult was it for you to go to the US?
Very difficult. So people may think it's cool to be the only girl in a class of 40 boys. Not at all. I'm sure that's the case all over the world, especially in India. It's a very hostile environment, and I've shared this with people in my institute. I'm on the board of the Alumni Association now, and so I'm hoping we can fix that. And I'm sure things have changed. So this is more than 20 years ago, but very difficult. As simple as, let's say you're sick and you miss a class. Like, who do you go to get your notes and just make sure you catch up? Versus for the boys, they all live in the same dorm, same hostel, as we call it in India. And so they have the support system to help them navigate the 4 years. It's very intense. It's one of the most competitive schools in the entire world. But they have that support of each other and they can get through it. But as a girl, especially if you're someone who's not going to keep smiling at them and you're very clear that you're there to study and do well, they treat you as a threat and nobody's friendly. So I think what you learn is to do pretty much everything on your own. So looking back, I think the independence, the self-reliance, all of that, I owe it to those 4 years. But coming to the US, to your question, it's, as you know, it's very hard to navigate that because you need to know how to study for the GRE, how to write your essays, how to figure out which schools to go to, who gives you assistantships. And the boys have a whole database of that information from their seniors. It's very well organized, and you're like an outsider where you don't know what to do. So I had to be so resourceful to tap into resources and people I knew, be very meticulous, plan well ahead to get to the university I did. And I did get into a whole bunch of universities. But yes, so short answer, it's very difficult simply because you're not part of the core group. You're treated as an outsider.
I'm very sure Paulo Coelho would say at that point, thank you for making life difficult. You made me resilient.
Very true. So today I have no regrets. I am who I am because of those 4 years.
We spoke about your second book at the beginning, and your second book is called, and I hope I pronounce it correctly, The Pancha Tantra, and was published in 2009. And it originated in India from before 300 BC. And it's a collection of stories about wisdom over the centuries. And as you told us up front, Aesop's fables were inspired by it. What inspired you to write a book about it?
So this was all Indians, pretty much all of us, when we grew up in India, we read these stories in picture format. So there's this comic series, it's called Amar Chitra Katha, which is literally pictures, stories in pictorial format. And that's how you read about these stories. So they're pretty much part of who we are. You just grow up reading these stories. So when my son was young, as I was giving him dinner, I naturally thought of reading these stories out to him. And so as I read them, I just figured, my God, these have way more profound messages than I thought they did, because all the characters are animals and it seems like a child's story. But then at the end of it, because I was at Apple at that point, you go through all the typical politics at the workplace, and you wonder, oh my God, each of these stories helps me more than him. And so I said I should read the original. Versus just sticking with this comic version. So I went to the library. So there was this 1925 translation of the original Sanskrit by a professor named Arthur Ryder. And he was the head of the South Asian, the philosophy department at UC Berkeley. So Oppenheimer, the movie, he was inspired by Arthur Ryder. So he was a very well-known and influential figure at Berkeley at that point. And so he had translated this work, and my God, it's fascinating. So I couldn't put it down because and then it had the original verses from the Sanskrit original translated so beautifully. So you could literally sit with one story for hours and learn so much from it. But the only downside was the style of writing was really old. So it's 1925. And then he stuck to the original where it's a story within a story within a story. And so by the time you come out, you don't even know what the main message was. And then the English and then a lot of Hindu terms, which the normal person wouldn't understand. And so I figured it's such a masterpiece that it deserves a rewrite. So between jobs, before I joined VMware after Genentech, I had a month off. And so I said, I'm going to do justice to this and rewrite the whole book so that more people, a modern audience, can benefit from the wisdom. And it truly is a masterpiece. So I encourage everyone to read it.
So, Sunita, it's obvious you're not just a mixture of engineering and finance, but you're also a mixture of engineering, finance, and literature. And I'm sure we'll be discovering other things along the way. When we think of Silicon Valley, we sit here and think of it as being really American. And we think about India as being really Indian. Just how diverse are Silicon Valley and India?
So diverse. So I think I'm just fortunate. I am who I am because I grew up in this melting pot that is India. So you have people of every religion, every background, both social, economic. You just see this spectrum, and you cannot but accept people and to just survive. So if you're going to have these rigid views and biases saying, okay, I won't work with so-and-so, I'm not going to be friends with so-and-so, even as a child, you will be friendless. So you just learn to appreciate and embrace that diversity without losing who you are, your original tradition. So in my case, I'm Hindu, so I have Muslim friends, Christian friends, people from all different economic backgrounds. So it's not that you lose your core, but then you're very comfortable with people who don't think like you. So I think that's the foundation for just setting you up for success in terms of being able to work well with others. And then Silicon Valley is just that at an international level, at a whole different scale. It is truly a melting pot, a true meritocracy. So at all the places I've worked at, I think immigrants, we dominate the scene here. And so you have a friend of mine said, I don't know what American English is. I only know Indian English, Chinese English, Russian English. So it's there's all these accented versions of English, and you're so used to it because that's how everyone here is. And it's a meritocracy. And I think any system where you have people with all these backgrounds, you have to measure people by impact and what they do versus how they look like and where they come from, what their connections are. So, which is why this place is so successful. So think about Apple, Nvidia, Google, like this, the biggest companies in the world thrive here. And I think it's because of this culture of diversity and where you accept it and let people thrive.
Sunita, there are so many stories and myths and opinions about Silicon Valley, and in particular in Europe. A lot of people travel to the Valley and try to understand what it is and how it works. So now, talking very, very direct, what is it for you? What is Silicon Valley? Why is it successful, and how has it developed? So what is your observation about this very unique little place in the world?
So I think the profile of people who come here, who do well, is they all aspire to do better for themselves. So they've all left their homelands. And again, I'm not saying you don't have Americans here, but even here, you would see people from Ohio, from other parts of the country who want to build their careers in Silicon Valley. And I think the common thread is people with high aspiration. So they want to do better than their parents. They want to do better than what they would have found in their respective home countries or in the other states that they grew up in the United States. So Type A people is what people characterize typical Silicon Valley people by, but I would say Type A is more harsh. It's just people with a deep aspiration to do well and to make the most of this life and the skills that they have. So just think about that. If that's the common thread and the profile of the person you bring in at any company here in the Silicon Valley, you have that the basic ingredients that you need to mold these people to do something meaningful. So then from there is the venture capital industry. So there's capital that's abundantly available and it's streamlined. So there's something called the Y Combinator, where if you are a young person with an idea, they'll help you with every step of what it takes to start a company and let it flourish. So there is that entire ecosystem that helps you do well. So what I would say is that it's the quality of people that come here is definitely a certain profile that lends itself to success. And then my personal experience is because of that and because of the diversity that I just mentioned, companies reward performance. So well before COVID, I wasn't measured by when I came to the office and when I left the office. I was measured by the work I did. And as a mother of a young child, that's huge, right? Where you're not tied and chained to your desk until 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. So I was able to have a balanced life of being able to go back and do good work because I was measured on impact. So, and that's absolutely the meritocracy that underlies, that's the foundation of Silicon Valley. So while, yes, you have the negative, I mean, there's the Me Too, there's all kinds of that, but that's common to the whole world. But I would, my experience has been very pleasant. And the only other thing I will say is just think about you can't put a dollar value to this, where you are working for companies that are literally revolutionizing the world. So at Apple, I was there before the iPhone was launched and Steve Jobs was still alive, and to listen to and open his town hall, sitting in the first row and listen to him speak about how the iPhone is going to transform the world, or at Facebook, like the entire way we communicate is transformed. It's just such a special experience.
So you have been in this town hall meeting when the iPhone was presented?
I left in 2005. The iPhone was launched after.
All right.
The iPod was launched when I was at Apple.
Okay.
And I still remember sitting in that first row in the town hall meeting when Steve Jobs first launched it internally before he launched it at the Macworld, the event. But what an experience. And just the way he speaks, his calmness.
So did you already expect that it will become such a success? I mean, that's from today's perspective, it seems obvious. But what was your feeling at that moment when he, was showing this little device?
Not at all, Philip. So when I graduated from Berkeley, I had 3 offers: Hewlett Packard, IBM, and Apple.
Uh-huh.
Apple stock was at $9. There was no iPod, no iPhone. And as you know, they'd just come out of bankruptcy. But somehow when I did the interviews and I saw just the buildings, he's big on aesthetics and everything should be
Yeah,
good and
obviously.
design and quality. So even the quality of the building or the room in which I sat for the interview, so inspiring. And I thought to myself, and this was like a company that had no future at that point compared to Hewlett Packard and IBM. And I felt I would be fortunate to work here. Just when I looked at the beauty of the building, the environment, and the people. So the interviews they were so kind, and you could see this is a company that is that typical California culture, which obviously you can make like. And so that's the reason even my husband said I should think twice before accepting the offer. But I said, and of course it was Treasury, which I love. So I joined the company just because of the culture. But very quickly it became obvious that Steve Jobs' vision of this whole consumer electronics and bringing digital home was going to take off. And then the iPod was the first success. So yes, at that point, I had no clue this is where the company would be. Like the company had $5 billion when I was there. And that was considered a huge amount. As of December 2021, they crossed 250 billion. Just think about that magnitude. But yeah, very fortunate.
Wow. So to all those people out there, interior design does matter, especially when you're holding job interviews at visionary companies. Brings the right people together. Are there any other secrets you can let us know about, Sunita, having worked for Apple and Facebook, that move their innovation or their visionary approach to things?
So many. So I think Facebook, mostly because I was there for 12 full years. So one thing I would say is like nothing happens randomly. Like, so if you are fortunate to have a tour of the Facebook the Meta campus, it's like Disneyland. So people would think, oh, there's coffee shops everywhere, literally restaurants. So that you have the best food and all kinds of cuisines on campus. Everything is free. So, and then people are walking around and there's bikes and massage chairs and such, what you read about in all the magazines and newspapers. It's all true. And then you would think these things are random, just as an example, but not at all. So they do deep research to figure out that, okay, if you set your campus up this way, then it fosters greater interaction. Like you'll bump into someone, have the ability to share a cool idea, and that's how creativity comes out. So like somebody is working on something, they stop, they just pause, go for a coffee, talk to someone else, and then that crystallizes into something big. So they've done research from all the way from Greek civilization and such to see that that's how you have the most creative environment. So I think that's number one. While it may seem it's like this California culture of wearing shorts and just being laid back, far from that. So everything is well thought of. And there's a reason these companies are structured and they operate the way they do. And it's something to learn from. So it's so hard to replicate that. And so it's obviously people from Google who came to Meta. And so they bring those best principles, and then executives from here will go to the next big Meta. And so you have this system of best practices and getting the most out of people. That is one. And then there's positivity, which is why I think one could argue that, okay, there's dangers of technology and such, but to have these people who really believe they can change the world. So like Mark Zuckerberg is an example, right? I think even as a teenager, he must have felt he has this power to change the world. And you can see that through everything he does. And that is very, very inspiring, and I want to go to work every day. There's ups and downs, but the fact that the founder is so focused, has this deep mission that they care about, same with Steve Jobs. No, there's just so many positive aspects of how creativity is fostered.
Great. I mean, what you just have mentioned, I mean, it's worth duplicating it. I mean, many regions and countries have tried to do it, but they're struggling a lot. Actually, they have failed somehow. So what is the missing piece? I mean, maybe it's the mindset. Is it like the combination of a lot of explicit and tacit aspects, which are not that easy to duplicate in a different region? What is your opinion about that? I mean, quite obviously, there is only one valley still today, even though everyone knows it's a good way to do things, you know?
Absolutely right. So I think it's the good fortune of having Stanford, UC Berkeley. So
Right.
there's pipeline of really, really smart students, then the venture capital piece. But like you said, maybe those things you can replicate elsewhere, like build the best universities and have the venture capital community, and people have tried to do it. I really believe it comes down to that mindset of embracing diversity. Again, the United States immigration, I know that's a hot topic now with the elections around the corner, but historically there's a method for you to come in like us. You come in as a student, you get an H-1 visa, and then you get a green card, you settle down, and then you've seen people from your country do that before. So there's a pattern where you can make this your second home. And then, as you know, there's little India's little, like where I live, which is Fremont, I have 5 Indian grocery stores within 5 miles of my house. So that's how many Indians there are over here. So there is this second piece where I think people feel comfortable, they feel accepted, and that's an ingredient that's hard to replicate.
Sunita, does knowledge transfer from different countries play a very, very, very big role in all of this innovation movement? People sometimes think their own education system is the center of the universe, and their own knowledge level, they can make something out of it on their own. Do you think that one of the secrets is actually bringing in knowledge transfer from other educational systems?
Definitely, Anne. And I think that's, again, the fundamental value of embracing immigration, bringing people from other countries. It's not even just the core technical expertise. Let's say Indians, we well known for being good in technology, in software, hardware, but it's the way we work. So we're able to come here, and then let's say you have a team of people from all over the world, the ability to quickly assimilate and then bring in your knowledge, accept the knowledge of people on your team to build a product. So, and then the way we think, like even the way we've learned math in India is different from the way my son learned math here. There's plus and minus to both, because the system here is always about practical applications. Ours is a little more theory, but sometimes you need that rote learning to build that concentration, the discipline to pursue higher studies. So I think it's at embracing that the way you learn, even, which is different for each culture, but to be comfortable with it as long as you're adding value, which is why I come back to measuring impact. So it doesn't matter what your background is, even in computer science, the way you learned how to code may be different, the language you learned may be different, but if you're able to have a frame of mind and a thinking framework that helps you pivot into this new product development that you're working on, I think that's what counts. So yes, absolutely important to embrace the form of education and the style and method of the different countries, so that you can have a successful workplace.
Let's think a little bit about the future role of leadership. And I mean, you in person, you have held several leadership roles, both in finance and in technology. And how is the leadership role changing also due to this technological shift, which is going on? I mean, in particular, finance, this is my feeling, my observation, is changing a lot. And also the role behind finance is changing a lot. Do you have some reflections about that?
So it's one thing is just the workforce has changed so much, right? So the way the younger people function, operate, that's so different from the way people of our generation think and approach work. So to be a leader, you have to accommodate their needs, their aspirations, and their goals. So there's this huge divide between what they want. And I think research says, which I'm sure you're aware of, that the younger generation wants purpose. So it's not just money and titles. They want to work on projects and at companies that have purpose and have a mission. So it's important in finance, especially if you're not at a bank. Finance is a support role at a company, even like all the ones I've worked at. So then how do you bring that purpose through? Which is why I think if the mission of the company is meaningful, then that's very attractive to young people and the next generation of the workforce. And then within finance, it's important to create that mission and vision. So while you just have a mindset of, oh, I'm here to support Meta grow, and if the business needs this, I will do this. But to be successful as a finance leader, you have to have a clear mission and vision for your own organization to be able to attract the best people. That's one. And then the embracing technology. So let's say your background is from accounting and you were from one of the big 4 accounting firms. You could be boxed into thinking that, okay, this is the core piece, and then missing that even there's technological innovation. So if you are in leadership in finance, I'm talking of the corporate world because that's the one I'm familiar with, you have to be able to embrace technology in all its forms. And of course, AI now is the biggest thing, but well before AI, like, is there a way you can automate the way you do your treasury? Is there a way to build dashboards and then have dedicated systems to do different things so that you operate more efficiently? So unless you have that mindset, it's very hard to be a leader. So you can't say, oh, I'm an expert in accounting, but I don't care about the technology piece.
What you're describing totally makes sense. I'm asking myself, also observing the education systems globally, does that really happen? I mean, I still see like studies and faculties and universities, structured in silos somehow. Like you are dedicated to this field, professional field, to finance or tech or to other fields like philosophy. But don't we actually need something which is much more cross-functional by nature from the very beginning, like studying more or less life somehow? I mean, this is maybe a little bit too abstract, but you know what I mean. I mean, should we also rethink education in order also to fulfill the expectation, having more people with a much broader education, actually?
Very true, Philip. Especially, I feel with AI, there's so much that's just going to transform the way work is done regularly. And so the way to be successful, and no one knows where this is going, just like with the internet. We knew it was a big thing, and we know AI is going to be a big thing, but how it actually evolves is a question mark. So the only thing you can equip a person with is a broader sense of their role, of just their basic skill sets and how they can add value, versus traditionally, if you say, okay, go learn accounting and then you can become a chief accounting officer someday, or go learn coding, you can become an excellent software engineer. So you have to give them a broader skill set, maybe things to do with their hands, which we've just lost touch with that. So whether it's gardening as a hobby or whatever you learn, where you learn the value of working with your hands and not just on the computer all the time, I think all of that will help. And then just this mindset of you have to keep changing. There is just no other way, evolving and learning new skills to survive in the future. So the earlier we train our children and students in colleges to do that, saying you can't box yourself into one thing. So whether it's learning, like you said, if you're in college, take a bunch of classes, do carpentry maybe, or pottery, something, and just to get that angle of philosophy. Right from that stage, unless you broaden your horizon and say, if I have to survive in this world, I need to build that muscle, it's going to be very difficult.
In this context, sorry, Anne, for interrupting you, but I have something in mind. I mean, maybe it seems a little bit abstract, but if we take into account also like religions, which seem to be sometimes also quite broad. I mean, religions deal a lot of with how life is and how people are, the nature of people, etc. So, can we also learn something from different religious views in order to tackle our technological challenges, which seems in the first hand maybe quite contradictional, but maybe there is some meat behind?
100%. And I'm a clear example of that myself. I'm Hindu, and of course, I follow this religion. But in general, Hinduism is it's just a way of life. So it is spirituality that can apply to the way you lead your daily life and bring you peace of mind. And that's what the religion is all about. And I'm a huge beneficiary of that. And I think what it gives you is, if you bring religion to this, there's a bigger picture, right? Versus our problem is we're so stuck with our little minds that say, okay, here's my goal. I need to achieve this. I have to make so many million, like especially in the Silicon Valley. I have so-and-so bought a $5 million house. I have to buy a $6 million house. So you get caught up in these small, very petty, not petty, like materialistic goals. And we all know those are beyond our control. So there is no way you can say that, oh, if you do X, you will get that $6 million.
For sure.
So the only way to deal with that uncertainty and inability to chart what's coming is to have faith in a higher power. And so that's basic, which is what every religion is about. So it allows you to put that trust and faith that there is some, if you don't even want to call it God, like some universal principle that's there to kind of govern this world. So it takes that burden of and the anxiety away from you. But more at a practical level, it's all about dealing with things calmly, right? So we all know you're going to put in your best effort, but the outcome is never something you expect. Like you could be the star programmer and then the company is going through a downturn and you get laid off. So it's not because you are bad, but it's because the company is just not having a good time. And how do you deal with that? Or you have a boss who's mean to you. So not your fault, but for some reason he or she doesn't like you, but you have to deal with it. So, and for all of that, unless you practice calming down your mind with whatever technique, okay, there's a force beyond me, and therefore I'm not going to worry as much. That force will take care of me. So that's basic devotion. Or mindfulness, where you're saying, okay, my thoughts are I'm getting carried away by my thoughts. I'm getting anxious. To pull your thoughts down by either watching your breath, the classic meditation or mindfulness examples. But unless you bring something of that into your daily routine, because these things don't happen overnight. And when that crisis hits, which is you get laid off or your boss yells at you and you don't know how to react, at that point, you're not going to suddenly come up with some mindfulness method to help you. So you have to build that gradually every day and carve time out to attain that peace of mind. So I think it's a crucial element. And the truth is, we should not box people into saying this is better than that, meaning religion. Like, oh, Hinduism offers this, Islam offers this, Christianity offers this. Within the faith that you're born in, take the best principles so that they can help you. Because it's obviously there's value. And if you grew up going to a church, that's what's going to resonate with you. You can't suddenly ask that person to go to a temple. So each one should do what they grew up in, the framework of what they're familiar with, but take the best of it and take the practical pieces of it. And don't get bogged down into the superstitions and such. But the goal should be to calm down your mind and lead a life that is less anxious.
Great.
Sunita, when you talk about continual change and you talk about the spiritual side of things, how important is answering the question, who am I, when everything is changing around? If you look at your own background, you were an engineer, you were a finance person, you're a board member, but who are you really? Is that something that can help people through this time of change? Who am I if I leave all my titles away?
Totally, Anne. And I think there is a deeper spiritual answer, which I'll get to because I am very interested in this. But even at a practical level, at home, you play so many different roles. You're a mother, you're a wife, you're a daughter-in-law. And then if you go to work, you're an employee, and then you're a friend to somebody. So even at that level, there are so many roles we play. But unless you're anchored in who you are, by that, it's your values. Like, doesn't matter, you do 100 different things with all kinds of people that you have to work with, but then what defines who you are in terms of the values you stand for, where you will not compromise, where you will stretch to make sure you get this done right, because that's important to you. So I think that's super important to get that down and internalize it. So it can't just be something theoretical. So when there's a decision of, okay, someone asks you to do something that's crossing the line, you have to have 100% certainty and say, I will not. Even if you give me $10 million, I'm not going to do this because that is against my values. So it has to be so internalized that the decision-making is clear, there's clarity in the way you think, or someone offers you a job that pays really well, but it's unethical. And if that is going to cause you anxious, again, coming back to peace of mind, just say, no, the money is not worth it. Or if it's going to mean sleepless nights, that they're going to make you work 16 hours a day, and you are someone who needs your sleep at a very basic level. Like for me, I need 6 hours of sleep. I can't function otherwise. So it doesn't matter what dollars you give me, I need my sleep. I'm not going to sign up for such a role. So that's at a basic level, to know who you are in terms of what helps you function, what gives you peace of mind so that you can do well, because money is not everything, as I think all of us know. But then the deeper answer to who am I, is for me, I think that's why I'm so interested in the spiritual field. And I won't get into that too much, not relevant for this podcast. But I guess the philosophy I believe in is that you're not even the mind and the body. So that is the ultimate Hindu philosophy that says there is the soul. And so you die. For example, the classic example is in deep sleep. So you go to sleep, you're obviously disconnected from your mind and your body, but you still exist. You get up. So that there is something in you that is beyond this external mind and body, and that is the soul. And so the more you can, again, quieten your mind, not let it get distracted, and turn inwards, where the ego is completely dissolved. By that ego, I mean greed, any notion that you have about I am so-and-so, and my position, you get rid of all of that and come back to the essence. That is who am I? But that's a deeper answer, and I think I should just pause.
No, that's
No, that
extremely
was
interesting.
fantastic. That was fantastic. And especially bearing in mind that today you have to deal with cyber-risk oversight. It's very important to know how you actually manage to keep yourself on an even keel when you're dealing with risks. It's let's delve into that a little bit. The cyber-risk oversight, how interdisciplinary is that?
So that's something I've taken on only on the boards. So
Yes.
at Meta, we had a whole different cyber risk department. They're experts, as you know, that is a very, very specialized field. So I didn't have much exposure, but we've had an episode of social engineering fraud when I was at Meta. So I worked very closely with that team. So sometimes the FBI gets involved. So very interdisciplinary. So there is the IT function, there's the risk function, and then invariably there's money involved, because obviously everyone wants to steal the money, and that's why they're doing all these cyber attacks. So Treasury does get involved. So I have been involved in those kinds of issues while I was the treasurer. But where this specific cyber risk oversight is for the board work that I do. So since I left Meta last year, as you noted, I serve on boards. So for all public boards, there is an audit committee which has to oversee the financials and work with the auditor and with management to make sure the financials are right. And then part of that, given the increased threat of cyber risk is sometimes part of the audit committee's mandate, and in some companies it's its own committee. So as for the insurance companies, Baldwin Group that I'm on the board of, we have a technology and cyber risk committee that's separate. And that's what we do. So we have frameworks to figure out how we would handle this risk. So how do you identify what the risk is, what the response should be? And then there's what they call tabletop exercises, where you have simulated attacks to see how the team will respond. And then if it happens, what the communication channels are. So as a board member, what's important is that you find out, and how do they even surface that to you? And then now there's SEC requirements that you have to disclose these attacks and what the actual quantification of the impact is. So it's a very serious issue that every company faces, and which is why I took that course at Carnegie Mellon, to just be a better board member where I could perform that function even better.
Let's try to look a little bit into the future. I mean, given your long-standing career in Silicon Valley, do you have any idea or educated guess what might be the next big disruption that could transform everything around us in our society, but also, of course, in business?
It is, I think, AI related, where it's just so disruptive. And I'm not a huge user of AI, but as an example,
really?
Meaning, unlike some other people use it to write code, for example.
Yeah.
Right? So
Okay. Yeah.
it's
Got it.
not like I'm a software engineer who's using that to do my work. But as examples of what I use it for, I'm on the editorial board of a spiritual journal. And so I use it for proofreading. And it's so good. So think about it. In the past, you would have needed 5 people to do that. And then now, and the efficiency with which it does it, the accuracy. So I think that's the seed to your question of how it can transform. I really believe that most of these things, as it gets smarter and smarter, it can be done. So you will need human oversight, but a whole bunch of work, whether it's proofreading, even editing an article, and then I write, as you know. So I've tried composing poetry with ChatGPT, and it's
Oh,
awesome. You
great.
just put your basic thoughts of
Yeah.
what you want to write a poem about, and you have to kind of work with it. So it's like your friend who's smarter than you sometimes. And so you just work with it. It gives you a better suggestion. So it's fascinating where it becomes and then if you're a student, as you know, these days it's your best friend. So
Yeah.
the AI helps you do better at school. So I think what's transformative is it's like we're going to have this companion with us in anything we do. That's going to make our lives easier. And I guess my forecast is I think it's good for people who are not at the top level, meaning more mediocre people. This is a boon because let's say you're hardworking, but you're not as good as writing code as someone else who has that innate flair and talent. But because you have this AI companion, you're going to become as good as this person who's naturally competent. Or let's say poetry. Some people are gifted. And then here you are with some thoughts, but then AI can make you a gifted poet. So I think my short answer is that if you're smart enough, and you should be, I think it's imperative, you're not going to survive otherwise, you have to learn to work with it as your friend. And if you do that, it's just going to be so transformative. So what that means is you have more free time, which is why I come back to doing things with your hands and old school. So but then if the fridge isn't working, you need the electrician who can actually do that. AI at this point can't do it. Maybe the robot will eventually. So I think all of us should develop some skill that AI can't touch yet, so that we will have more free time on our hands, so we're more productive versus watching TV all day.
You almost have answered our final question, right, Anne? I mean,
yeah, nearly.
Yeah.
Definitely. I have to say something at that point, though, just a quick tip to all the audience. I send poems to all my friends written by ChatGPT at the end of the day, writing what my people have told me in conversations and asking ChatGPT to make a poem out of it. And the unisono response is, "Where did you get that and how can I learn to do it?" It's been the best way to get all my friends to use ChatGPT because they love it.
And suddenly you're this creative genius, which is awesome.
Yes.
Let's come indeed to our last questions. Even though we would have so many more in mind, I want to know, and you can answer that quite briefly, maybe with 3 bullet points or so. What are the 3 things you have in mind which have the highest priority for you in the next time? Taking into account your career, society, your personal level, your family, whatsoever. So 3 things which have top priority for you in the next few weeks and months.
Okay. So first, my main occupation now is, as I said, I serve on boards. I want to be a better board member. So that's just been my philosophy throughout. Whatever I do, I want to do well. So there's so much training material available, but it's all on you. So you have to take the initiative. You have to be self-motivated. They're not going to tell you to take these classes, but I just want to be more organized and methodical about taking on all these certifications and classes to become a better board member. That's one. So that I feel that this next chapter of my life, I'm being productive and useful. The second is definitely family. So my parents are 80 plus, so are my in-laws. So we just did green cards for them. They're all here, which gives me a lot of comfort that we can do justice and help them lead a dignified final chapter. And help them as their health declines. So I just want to be there for them. So far they're all fine, but then I want them to have the confidence that I'm there for them and that they shouldn't worry. And I think that's the least I can do.
Oh, yeah.
As a daughter, and it gives me so much fulfillment. So I could be earning a lot more if I didn't do this in this next chapter of my life, but this is super rewarding. And the last is my spiritual quest that I kind of referenced earlier. I do want to find out who I am. So to Anne's question, so it's not just the level 1 of here are my values and such. It's I'm not even this body, I'm not even this mind. There is a soul, and deepen my practice, deepen my meditation, to at least get closer to that spiritual goal.
Wow,
Wonderful.
impressive.
Really great goals. Sunita, I'm going to ask you our last question, and there are millions of ways to answer it. But if you picked out of the bouquet of all the skills that people could have for the future, just 3 that you'd advise people to learn now, what would you choose?
So one is some expertise. So we all know AI is going to do a bunch of things, doesn't matter. And that has to be something that you have a natural flair for. So if you're good at technology, then master coding. Doesn't matter if AI can do it, but from your side, again, as I said, you need a human being to work with AI. So figure out that one skill, because you can't be just too spread out when it comes to technical skills. Or if you want to be a poet, learn to be a poet who's really good. So one is just pick 1 or 2 core competencies that you will get deep in and not just be broad. That's one. And then the second is, like I said, learning how to use technology to make you even better at those skills that you're trying to master. So don't try to do it the traditional way of reading a book, going to a course, and taking classes. You also have to learn to keep up with this, and it's changing so fast. So if there's a new version of ChatGPT, go play with it and learn how you can actually use it. So you don't have a choice. You can't say I won't touch the technology piece. It has to be a part of whatever you do, even poetry, as we just discussed. And then the last is, I think, what we talked about, that broader perspective. So whether it's from a religious, spiritual angle, that there is a bigger purpose to life, we're all going to die someday. And it can't be just that. You're born, you eat, you get married, you have kids, and you die. There must be something more than that. And so some form of a quest for the higher life, the earlier you cultivate, the better. And with that comes ability to embrace change, work with people who are from different backgrounds, because you have a bigger picture to life than just the so-and-so bought a car, I need to buy a car, and get out of the very basic material, petty world and try to aspire for something higher. So I think if you have these 3, you're all set to do well.
Quite powerful. Dear Sunita, it was such a pleasure. So much inspiration in this conversation between of us. So thanks for joining and thanks for sharing your thoughts. Quite inspiring.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you from me too, Sunita. That was our conversation today, from India to the US and back to ourselves, with the multifaceted person, Sunita Parasuraman, who's a board member of Iris Energy and the Baldwin Group, but also spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley. Thank you very much. And if you, dear listeners, would like to send us a suggestion for someone who's just as inspiring as Sunita's been today, then please send us an email at podcast@i40.de. And with our hashtag DigiCompetence podcast, you can follow what's happening in our podcast. And those of you who are with us more often, they know that Philip and I will be doing somersaults again when you join us again for Being Digitally Competent with Philip Ramin and Anne Coark.